"You're nothing but a burden," my mom snapped, her voice cutting through the dining room like broken glass. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Before I could even process the sting, my sister leaned back in her chair, eyes cold and amused. "She's right," Sarah said lightly. "No one would miss you if you left." The room went quiet except for the humming of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stared at the half-eaten food on my plate, suddenly nauseous. "My name is Emma. I'm 26. And that was the night my family finally said out loud what they'd been making me feel my whole life. I'd heard versions of it before. Jokes about how I was too sensitive, comments about how I never lived up to my potential, comparisons to Sarah's perfect grades, perfect job, perfect life. But never like this. Never so naked. So deliberate. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't flip the table or throw a plate, even though I imagined the satisfying sound of porcelain shattering against the wall. Instead, I swallowed the burn in my throat and lifted my eyes to look at them. My mother, still glaring, and my sister, smirking like she'd just made a casual observation about the weather. In that moment, something inside me went very, very still. I realized they weren't saying these things in anger. They were saying them because they believed them. Because to them, I had become the family's dead weight, a background character, a convenient punching bag to make themselves feel bigger. So I made a decision. Not the impulsive, dramatic kind they would later accuse me of, but a quiet, razor-sharp one. If I was nothing to them, then my absence wouldn't matter, right? If no one would miss me, then leaving would just prove their point. Or expose the lie. I cleared my plate, helped load the dishwasher, and went to my room like any other night. No slamming doors. No theatrics. They wanted me invisible? Fine. I would disappear properly. That was the last night I slept under my mother's roof. I walked out of that house without a scene, without a goodbye, without a trace. And this week, years later, I got a voicemail from my mother that started with, "Please come home. If you were me, would you go back to the people who called you a burden? Or make them finally understand what it costs to lose you?" I didn't pack like someone running away. There was no suitcase flung open, no frantic stuffing of clothes under the harsh glow of a bedroom light. I knew my mother well enough to know she would hear every drawer, every zipper. So I moved slowly, methodically, like I was just organizing my life instead of dismantling it. I folded my essentials into a worn backpack. A couple of changes of clothes, my journal, my worn-out copy of Jane Eyre, the envelope with the small amount of cash I'd saved from the bookstore, and the cheap phone charger I could never find when I needed it. On my desk was a framed family photo, my mom with her perfect smile, Sarah with her graduation cap, and me off to the side, half shadowed, half smiling. I didn't take it. I left it face down. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, same brown eyes, same tired dark circles, same invisible girl, and whispered, "Let's see if anyone notices you're gone." I waited until past midnight. I knew my mother would fall asleep in front of the TV, a glass of wine balanced on the coffee table. And Sarah would be in her room on a call, talking loudly about her latest promotion, her latest achievement, her latest proof that she was the success story of the family. My father had left years ago, and somehow that had also become my fault. If you weren't so difficult, maybe he wouldn't have given up. Mom had once spat under her breath, thinking I didn't hear. I remembered that as I tied my shoelaces. No one gives up on someone they actually see. I slipped out the back door, the cool Boston air hitting my face like a slap. The porch light flickered above me, casting long, shaky shadows. Every step down those wooden stairs felt like walking out of a life I had never chosen. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, a promotional text from the bookstore, and the irony nearly made me laugh. I had spent years surrounded by stories of people who broke free, chose themselves, started over. I just never believed I could be one of them. I walked to the end of the street, then another, then another. With every step, the house behind me shrank into the darkness, and something in my chest loosened. Not enough to call it freedom yet, but enough to call it possibility. I didn't have a grand plan. I wasn't secretly rich. I didn't have a dream job waiting. What I had was Mia. She had once told me, half joking, "If you ever need to disappear, my couch is your witness protection program." At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now, in the middle of the night with my backpack digging into my shoulders, it didn't sound like a joke. When she opened the door, eyes wide with sleep and confusion, I didn't even try to pretend I was fine. "Hey," I said, my voice hoarse. "I left." She didn't ask. Left what? She just stepped aside and pulled me into a hug so tight I finally let myself cry. Not the noisy, dramatic sobbing I'd always been ashamed of. Silent tears that soaked her t-shirt. Tears that belonged to the girl who had just become nobody's daughter and nobody's sister in a single night. Over the next days, I watched my phone like it was a bomb ready to go off. At first, I expected an explosion, angry calls, furious messages, accusations about how selfish and ungrateful I was. Instead, nothing. No missed calls, no messages, no, "Where are you?" Not even a, "Did you take your charger?" My mother, who once screamed at me for not answering in under 3 minutes, went completely silent. Sarah, who had just said no one would miss me, apparently meant it. The first day, the silence hurt. The second, it burned. By the end of the week, it did something else. It hardened into resolve. If they could erase me that easily, then I would use that invisibility. I would build a life so separate, so untouchable, that when they finally did notice I was gone, it would already be too late to claim any part of it. Tell me honestly, if your family didn't call you after you vanished, would you crawl back and beg for their attention? Or decide that their silence is the clearest answer you'll ever get? Mia's apartment was small, cluttered, and somehow still felt like the safest place I had ever been. Her couch was lumpy, the kitchen sink dripped, and the radiator hissed like an annoyed cat every night. But no one there called me a burden. No one compared me to Sarah. No one looked at me like I was a half-finished disappointment. The first week, I mostly slept. My body crashed after years of carrying a constant low-level panic, waiting for the next comment, the next criticism, the next casual reminder that I was not enough. When I wasn't sleeping, I wrote. At first, it was just messy, angry journal entries. Mom said this. Sarah did that. Maybe I really am the problem. But one evening, Mia picked up my journal after it fell open on the coffee table. "Emma," she said slowly, skimming a page, "this isn't just venting. This is a story." I snatched it back, embarrassed. "It's just me whining." "No," she insisted. "It's like reading a character trapped in a house where everyone keeps telling her she's nothing until she finally vanishes. People would relate to this. You know how many stories we shelve at the bookstore about toxic families?" I did know. I'd handled thousands of them, scanned them, restocked them. Never once did I imagine my own pain as something people might want to read. Mia nudged me. "What if you turned it into something? An article, a blog, a series? Anonymously if you want. Let's be real. Your mother's not exactly browsing mental health blogs between her wine refills." Her joke made me laugh harder than I had in weeks. That night, I opened a blank document and wrote the sentence. My family only noticed me long enough to blame me. Then I kept going. I wrote about the dinner table conversations where I disappeared in plain sight. About the time my mom forgot my birthday, but threw a huge party for Sarah's promotion. About the day I won a small local writing contest, and my mom said, "That's nice, but it's not like a real achievement, right?" I wrote until my fingers cramped and my eyes blurred. I stripped the names, changed the city, kept the feelings raw and ugly and real. Mia helped me set up a blog, anonymous, under a pen name. I hit publish expecting nothing. Within a week, the first post had hundreds of views, then thousands. Comments poured in. "This is my mother." I thought I was the only invisible sibling. I left too. And no one called me either. Every notification was a tiny shock to my system. For the first time, my words, my existence, were not just tolerated. They were seen. They mattered. People were sending my story to their friends, their therapists, their own siblings. One message stuck with me. "I hope one day your family realizes what they lost. I hope they understand what it's like to be on the outside for once." That sentence lit a slow, deliberate fire inside me. Up until then, I'd been focused on survival, finding a part-time job, paying Mia some rent, building a tiny life that was mine. But as my audience grew, something shifted. My story had power. My voice had reach. And if my mother and sister ever stumbled across the woman they decided was nothing, they wouldn't recognize her. But the world would. One night, scrolling through social media, I saw a familiar face pop up on a corporate page. Sarah. "Congratulations to our regional marketing lead, Sarah Hayes, for her innovative campaign." The photo showed her in a sleek blazer, smiling confidently, holding a framed award. I stared at it, a strange déjà vu prickling my skin. The slogan on the campaign looked familiar. Too familiar. It was a line I had drafted in a notebook months before, at the bookstore, when Sarah had asked me, "Hey, can you help me brainstorm a tagline? You're good with words?" It's for work. Nothing big. I remembered the thrill of her asking for my help. I remembered staying up late perfecting it. I remembered her saying, "Thanks," like I'd just passed the salt. Now, there it was, under a company logo, winning her an award. No credit, no mention, no acknowledgement. My words. Her glory. Again. Something inside me clicked into place, not fragile this time, but sharp. This wasn't just emotional neglect. This was theft. Of ideas. Of effort. Of identity. I closed the tab and opened a new document. This time, I didn't write about being invisible. I wrote about being used, abused, erased. And I made myself a promise. I wouldn't just heal and move on quietly. I would make sure the people who called me a burden finally understood the weight of what they'd thrown away. So tell me, if someone stole your voice, your ideas, your worth, and then told you nobody would miss you, would you let them keep everything? Or would you start planning how to take it back? 2 years passed. 2 years of double shifts at the bookstore, and then at a small indie publisher that took a chance on the anonymous girl whose blog had gone viral. 2 years of therapy sessions, where I unlearned the idea that love had to hurt to be real. 2 years of writing late into the night, turning my bruises into chapters. My blog grew into a book proposal. The book proposal turned into a contract. My editor said, "Your story is going to help so many people leave situations they never thought they could escape." It was the first time an adult had looked me in the eyes and told me I was going to change lives. Not as a comparison, not as an afterthought, but as the point. During those 2 years, I heard almost nothing from my family. A couple of bland texts from my mother on holidays. "Hope you're well." "Merry Christmas." No calls, no real questions. She never asked where I lived now, what I did for work, who I had become without her. Sarah didn't message me at all. The silence used to feel like abandonment. Eventually, it felt like confirmation. I had been right to leave. I was in the middle of editing a chapter about the night I disappeared when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my chest tugged. A voicemail icon popped up. I put the phone aside, intending to listen later, but my curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. My mother's voice, shaky and smaller than I remembered, cracked through the speaker. "Emma, it's Mom." She never called herself that on the phone. It was always, "It's me," or "It's your mother," like the role itself was sacred. "Please come home," she said, and the words were so surreal I almost laughed. There was a pause, a sharp inhale. In the background, I could hear chaos, muffled voices, what sounded like a door slamming, someone crying. "Things are bad," she continued. "Sarah needs you. I need you. Please just call me back. We we were wrong about a lot of things. Wrong about a lot of things." My heart raced, but not with the old fear. This was something else. A cold, focused alertness. I replayed the voicemail and heard more the second time. The desperation in her voice. The way she stumbled over, "We were wrong." The hint of panic when she mentioned Sarah. I texted Mia. She called. Mia replied instantly. "You okay?" My fingers hovered over the screen before I typed. "Voicemail. Please come home. Something's wrong." A minute later, my phone lit up with Mia's incoming call. "So," she said without preamble, "what are we thinking? Fire? Bankruptcy? Scandal? Alien invasion?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. She sounded scared. "Good," Mia shot back. "Maybe she finally knows what fear feels like." "She said Sarah needs me," I murmured. "Is that supposed to be a selling point?" Mia asked. "The same sister who said nobody would miss you?" A part of me wanted to rush over, fix everything, fall back into the old role of emotional janitor, cleaning up everyone else's mess. The reflex sat in my bones, familiar and toxic. But another part, the part that had survived 2 years of rebuilding, stopped me. "What if something really bad happened?" I asked softly. "What if—" "Emma," Mia said, her voice gentler now. "Something really bad already happened. They spent years breaking you down. They called you a burden. They let you disappear. Don't forget that just because their house is finally catching fire." Her words hit hard because I knew she was right. Still, the voicemail nagged at me, looping in my head. "We were wrong. Please come home. Sarah needs you." I opened my laptop and searched Sarah's name. It didn't take long to see it. A trending thread dragging my sister's company through the mud. Anonymous posts accusing someone in her department of stealing ideas, bullying coworkers, taking credit for unpaid interns' work. Screenshots of emails. Snippets of presentations. A leaked internal memo about an investigation. And there, tagged in several angry comments, was Sarah's profile. My stomach tightened, not with sympathy, but with recognition. This was the system she had thrived in, the system that rewarded her for using people like me. Only now, the spotlight was turning on her. People were calling her a thief, a fraud, a bully. They were telling stories that sounded a lot like mine. The difference was, this time, the world was paying attention. I sat back, heart pounding, mind racing. My mother's voicemail suddenly made sense. They didn't want me home because they missed me. They wanted me home because they were bleeding, and for years I'd been the bandage. But I wasn't a bandage anymore. I was the one holding the pen that could write how this story ended. If your abusers called only when their world started crumbling, asking you to come home to fix what they broke, would you rush back to save them? Or walk in with your eyes open, knowing this time you held the power? I didn't decide immediately. Old Emma would have been on the first bus, apologizing on the way for not coming sooner. New Emma took 3 days. 3 days of listening to that voicemail on repeat. 3 days of reading every thread about Sarah's company, every leaked email, every anonymous testimony from people who sounded like slightly different versions of me. She took my idea and presented it as her own. She told me I should be grateful to even be in the room. When I confronted her, she said I was being oversensitive. It was like hearing my family dinner table but with corporate branding. On the third day, I called my mother back. She picked up on the first ring. Emma? Her voice trembled like the ground had been shaking under her for days. Hi, I said calmly. You called? Yes, I did. There was an awkward pause. For the first time in my life, she sounded unsure of what to say to me. Good, I thought. Things are complicated, she continued. Sarah's in trouble at work. They're saying horrible things about her online, and some of her clients have pulled out. And there's this investigation. I've seen, I cut in. I read the posts. Then you know they're exaggerating, she snapped, instinctively defensive. Sarah might have made mistakes, but she's a good person. She works so hard. She doesn't deserve to be destroyed over rumors. Mom, I said quietly. I believe them. Silence. Pure, stunned silence. You. What? She finally choked out. I believe them, I repeated. Because I know Sarah. I know what she thinks she's entitled to. I know what she's taken from me. This is not new behavior, it's just the first time there are consequences. I expected her to explode. Instead, her voice cracked. Emma, please, we can't do this over the phone, just come home, we need to talk. Why? I asked. What do you need from me exactly? There it was. The real question. The one she'd been circling. You're good with words, she said quickly, desperation bleeding into manipulation. You always were. Maybe you could help Sarah write a statement, or coach her on what to say, or talk to her company. If they heard from you, if you said she's not... Not what? I interrupted. Not someone who tells her own sister that no one would miss her if she left? Not someone who took my work and used it for her own promotion. Oh, for God's sake, you're still on about that, she snapped, the old sharpness breaking through. It was just a slogan. It was mine, I said. And that's the point. It was always just my feelings, just my ideas, just me. Until you needed something. Then suddenly I was useful. She went quiet again. I could almost hear her recalibrating, deciding which script to use now that guilt and dismissal weren't working. Emma, she tried again, softer. We said things we didn't mean. That night, we were stressed. We were worried about you. And we overreacted. But you left. Do you know what it felt like? Waking up and realizing you were gone? Do you know what it felt like? I asked, my voice low. To leave and realize that no one called? The silence on the line was an answer by itself. Finally, she whispered, please, just come. For a day. If you still want nothing to do with us after that, I won't stop you. I didn't trust that promise. But I did know one thing. I wanted to see them. Not because they needed me, because I wanted to look them in the eye and let them see what they had created and what they had lost. Fine, I said. I'll come. One day. No guarantees. When I hung up, Mia was already watching me from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. You're going, aren't you? She asked. Yeah, I admitted. Do you think that's a mistake? I think, she said slowly, it depends who walks into that house. If it's the Emma who left that night, it'll destroy you. If it's the Emma who wrote a book about surviving them, they should be the ones afraid. Her words settled inside me like armor. On the train ride back to my old neighborhood, I watched the city blur by and reread the chapters of my own book on my phone. My story, my voice, my proof that I was more than what they said I was. By the time I reached my stop, my hands weren't shaking anymore. When I walked up to the house, it looked smaller. The paint was peeling, the lawn overgrown, a "for sale" sign leaning crookedly in the yard like even the house wanted to leave. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She looked older. Not just in the way time does to everyone, but in the way guilt and stress carve themselves into your face when you've run out of people to blame. "Emma," she breathed. For a heartbeat, I thought she might hug me. She didn't. She just stepped aside. I walked in. The same hallway, the same pictures, the same face-down family photo on the table where I'd left it, untouched. Interesting. Sarah was on the couch, laptop open, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun that looked more defeated than casual. She looked up at me, and for a second, I saw the sister I used to trail behind as a kid, desperate for any scrap of approval. Then I remembered her voice. "No one would miss you if you left." "So," I said, closing the door behind me. "You wanted me home. If you were standing in front of the people who broke you, and for the first time, they were the ones falling apart, would you reach out your hand to pull them up? Or let them finally feel what it's like to hit the ground?" Sarah didn't jump up to hug me. She didn't apologize immediately either. She just stared, jaw clenched, like she was trying to decide whether I was her last hope or her latest accuser. "You look different," she finally said. "You don't." The words slipped out before I could stop them, but I didn't take them back. My mother hovered near the doorway like a guilty ghost, wringing her hands. "Can we all sit down?" she asked. We've got a lot to talk about." We sat at the same dining table where my mother had once called me a burden, and Sarah had agreed. This time, I chose my seat deliberately, at the head of the table, the spot my mother always took. Her eyebrows twitched, but she said nothing. "Good. We were rewriting rules today." "So," I began, "you said you were wrong about a lot of things. I'm listening." My mother inhaled shakily. "We shouldn't have said what we did that night. We were cruel. I was angry, and I took it out on you. I let Sarah's success blind me, and I didn't see how I was hurting you." "You didn't just not see it," I corrected. "You refused to. I told you, again and again, and you said I was being dramatic. You called me sensitive. You said I was jealous." "I know," she whispered. "And when you left, I realized." "No," I cut in. "When I left, you stayed silent. For months. For years. You sent holiday texts. You didn't ask where I lived. You didn't ask what I did. You didn't ask if I was okay. Don't pretend you had some big epiphany the day after I disappeared. Your realization started when Sarah's life collapsed. Not when mine almost did." The color drained from her face. "Good." Sarah slammed her palm against the table. "This isn't fair," she snapped. "You think I haven't paid enough already? My career is destroyed. People are calling me a monster online. I might get fired. I might never work in this field again. How much more do you want from me?" I turned to her slowly. "That depends. How much did you take?" Her eyes flashed. "I worked for everything I have." "Really?" I tilted my head. "So those interns are lying? Those coworkers are lying? The ideas you presented just magically appeared in your head? And what about the campaign slogan you borrowed from me?" "Oh my God, you're still obsessed with that?" she groaned. "Are you seriously going to hold my entire life over some words you scribbled in a notebook?" "Words," I said evenly, "are how I make my living now. So yes, I take them seriously." My mother blinked. "What do you mean, how you make your living?" I pulled a copy of the early manuscript out of my bag and set it on the table. The working title stared up at them. Burden. How I Left the Family That Never Saw Me. My name was on the cover. My real name. Not a pen name. Not a shadow. Me. "I wrote a book," I said. about growing up in a house where my worth only existed in comparison to someone else's, about being told I was nothing, about leaving and realizing I was more than everything you tried to convince me I was. My mother reached out a trembling hand, skimming a few lines at random. Her face crumpled as she read. Emma, this is about us. Yes, I said, and about people like you, and people like me, and thousands of readers who messaged me saying your voices sound exactly like their abusers. Readers? She echoed faintly. People have read this? Millions, I said. The blog, the posts, the essays. The book isn't even out yet, and there's already a waiting list. Sarah's eyes widened. You wrote about us online? I wrote about what you did, I corrected. If you see yourselves in it, that's interesting, isn't it? Panic flickered across her face. Do you use our names? No, I said. But if you're worried people will recognize you from your behavior, maybe that says more about you than about my writing. My mother looked like she might be sick. People will think we're monsters. Well, I didn't make you monsters, I replied. I described what it felt like to be your daughter and your sister. If the shoe fits. Sarah stood abruptly, chair scraping. You need to fix this, she demanded. You need to tell people you exaggerated, that you were emotional, that it wasn't that bad. You need to post something to defend me, to say you don't think I'm a bully. You told me, I said slowly, that no one would miss me if I left. Why do you think you deserve my defense now? Because we're family, she exploded. Because we're blood. Because you don't destroy your own for strangers' entertainment. I leaned forward, voice cold. I didn't destroy you. I walked away. The rest? You did that all by yourself. And as for blood, that never stopped you from bleeding me dry when it suited you. My mother whispered, Emma, please. We made mistakes. We're paying for them now. Isn't that enough? No, I said simply, because you still don't get it. You're worried about your reputations, your careers, your comfort. You never once asked how close I came to disappearing in a way you couldn't fix. Their eyes snapped to me. What do you mean? My mother asked, voice shaking. I held her gaze. I thought about ending my life, I said. More than once. Because if even my own family thought I was a burden, what was the point? I didn't do it. But I could have. And you would have stood at my funeral crying about how you never saw the signs, when the signs were literally me telling you over and over that I was drowning. My mother burst into tears. Real ones. Ugly, messy, terrified tears. For once, I didn't rush to comfort her. I let her feel it. Let her sit in the reality that her words had pushed her own child to the edge. So no, I continued. Losing a job isn't enough. Losing face isn't enough. You don't get to erase what you did with a few tears and a promise you'll try harder. You want my help? You want my forgiveness? You want me to stand between you and the consequences you created? I shook my head slowly. You're going to have to sit with this. For a long time. Without me cushioning the blow. If the people who hurt you finally broke down and begged you to rescue them from the consequences of their own cruelty, would you throw them a lifeline? Or let them finally drown in what they poured over you for years? I stayed in that house for 6 hours, long enough to say everything I had swallowed for 26 years, long enough to watch my mother go from defensive to devastated, to see Sarah swing from angry to desperate to eerily quiet. At one point, she whispered, "Did you ever love me?" The question surprised me. I did, I answered honestly. I loved the version of you I thought might one day look at me and see a sister instead of a measuring stick. And now? She asked. I thought about it. Now I care what happens to you, I said. But I don't trust you. I don't feel safe around you. and I don't owe you my healing. That was the difference. Before, my love meant I would endure anything. Now, it meant I could care about someone and still walk away. My mother kept repeating, "We can change. We'll do better. We'll go to therapy. We'll read your book. We'll apologize publicly if we have to." I believe that maybe she meant it. In this moment, under this pressure, with everything crumbling. But would she still mean it when the heat died down? When the scandal faded? When people stopped talking? I'd spent my whole life betting on their potential instead of believing their patterns. I wasn't doing that anymore. As the sun began to set, I stood up. "I'm leaving," I said. My mother shot to her feet. "You can't just leave again, not like this." "I'm not disappearing this time," I replied. "I'm choosing." Sarah looked up at me, eyes red. "So that's it? You get your book deal, your little revenge story, and we're just done?" I almost laughed. "You really think this is about a little revenge story? This is about reclaiming my life, my voice, my narrative. You were the ones who turned yourselves into villains. I just stopped editing out the ugly parts." I picked up my backpack, the same one I'd left with that night. It felt lighter now. I paused at the doorway and turned back one last time. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "My book is still coming out. I'm not changing the truth to protect you. If you want to do better, start with telling the truth yourselves. Apologize to the people you hurt. Not just me. The interns, the coworkers, the kids you raised to believe their worth depended on how useful they were to you." My mother's lip trembled. "And us?" "I'm not cutting you off completely," I said. "But I'm not coming home either. Home isn't this house. Home is wherever I'm treated like a human being, not a burden. Right now, that's not here." My mother stumbled forward as if to hug me, then hesitated, arms dropping helplessly to her sides. "When will we see you again?" "I don't know," I said. "That depends on you. Not on your tears today, but on your choices tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that." I walked out. The air outside felt different than it had the first time I left. Back then, the night had swallowed me like I was nothing. Now, the world opened up around me like a page waiting to be written. On the train back to my new life, my phone vibrated with messages from my editor, my therapist, Mia. People who saw me, people who chose me. When I got back to Mia's apartment, she wrapped me in a hug and didn't ask, "So, did they apologize?" She asked, "How do you feel?" That was the point of all this, I realized. Not whether they were sorry, whether I was free. A week later, my book's pre-orders doubled after a podcast episode where I read an excerpt about the "Please Come Home" voicemail. I didn't name my mother. I didn't have to. People recognized the tone, the guilt, the manipulation laced with need. The DM box filled again. I got that voicemail too. Mine said, "You're tearing this family apart after decades of abuse." I went back. I wish I hadn't. One night, late, alone at my desk, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. The caller ID made my stomach clench. "Mom?" I stared at it for a long moment before pressing play. "Emma," she said softly, "I read the manuscript. All of it. I won't ask you to change it. I won't say you're wrong. I just want you to know that I'm trying. I started therapy. I apologized to someone today. Really apologized. Not just to get something. I don't know if it matters to you, but I'm trying to become someone you could love without hurting yourself." There was a pause, then a familiar, broken sigh. "I still want you to come home, but I'm starting to understand that home might not be here anymore. I hope one day we can build a different one, even if it's not under this roof." She hung up. I didn't call back. Not yet. I saved the voicemail, though. Not as a promise, but as proof. Proof that my leaving, my silence, my refusal to be their cushion anymore had finally forced them to look at themselves. That was my revenge. Not flames or public humiliation or screaming matches, though the scandal had already taken care of some of that. My real revenge was this. I became everything they said I couldn't be without them. And they had to watch from the outside. I turned their favorite narrative, "You're nothing without us," inside out, and handed it back to them. I was something. I was someone. I always had been. They were just too blinded by their own reflections to see it. Now, they had to live with the knowledge that when they called me a burden, they were pushing away the best thing they ever had. My story doesn't end with a perfect reconciliation or a cinematic group hug. It ends with me closing my laptop, turning off my phone, and going to sleep in a place where no one calls me too sensitive for needing kindness. A place I pay for with money I earned using the voice they once dismissed. A place I chose. My home. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you ever go back to a house that only wanted you when it was burning? Or would you let them learn, slowly and painfully, what it really means to lose you?